Good evening. Now I know why my remarks had to be checked by the board of directors. It's the only remarks that have been checked. It's great to be here tonight to present the Spirit of Keystone Award to one of our oldest and most loyal friends, John Echohawk. A good friend of John's, Bob Craig's, and mine was Charlie Loha, one of the first judges of American Indian heritage. Charlie once said, "Not much has changed for American Indians, except that John took the battle for us from the U.S. Cavalry to the U.S. Courthouse." John has become one of the leading American Indians of the 20th century and was listed as one of the 100 most influential lawyers by the National Law Journal, and has received many awards during the course of his life in the field of law. We first got to know John almost 40 years ago, and I'm not going to go through a 40-year history, I promise. When we organized the Keystone Indian Government and Business Roundtable to search for common ground on issues that divided communities of the Western United States. That effort resulted in a policy to move towards negotiated Indian water rights settlements rather than through costly litigation. And I have to say that John and his colleagues have been negotiating those kinds of deals for the last 35 years. John, I also want to remind you that it was about at this time during the Keystone Indian days that you gave me my Indian name, Eddie White Boy. I haven't forgot it, and I cherish it till this day. John is a true visionary and champion of justice. His work has advanced the civil, social, political, and economic rights of American Indians and Alaskan Natives. He and his outstanding team of attorneys at NARF have been defending and advancing principles of self-determination, self-government, and tribal sovereignty for the past 45 years. John and his team have protected treaty rights and the rights of tribal government to govern within the political framework of the Constitution of the United States of America. He's advanced the rights of Indian children and the right of Indian women to be free from violence. And I think I can say without exaggeration that John's work has touched upon every aspect of the life of people in Indian country. But it doesn't even stop there. On the international side, John and his colleagues have been active at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change in Paris, which underscored the rights of indigenous people. I could go on, but the board has cut my talk immensely. So let me end my remarks of introducing John by saying the following. He was the first graduate of the University of New Mexico's special program to train American Indians in 1970 and was a founding member of the American Indian Law Students Association. Who knew at the time that this very special program at the University of New Mexico would end up fueling the Native American Rights Fund, and surely one of the greatest Indian legal experts in the history of the United States of America. Congratulations, John.
Thank you, Ed. I'm very honored to receive the Spirit of Keystone Award. As Ed said, it's really about the spirit of our founder at the Keystone Policy Center, Bob Craig. And Bob knew that bringing together Indian business people and tribal leaders would result in something great: solutions, education that would further the goals of both business people and tribal leaders. It was a very difficult time. We had just reversed the federal policy of breaking Indian treaties, recognizing that tribes are government under these treaties with a government-to-government relationship with the United States government, but the business leaders were used to dealing with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which used to run everything on the reservations. And so having to deal with tribal leaders for the first time was totally new to them. But Bob knew that with a little dialogue that we could bring them up to date on our history and these legal developments, and they would understand, and they did. And it launched a whole new era in tribal energy development. These relationships led later to these same business people coming to Ed and Bob and saying, now we have this issue of these tribes filing these water rights claims all across the West, in the largest cases the courts in the West have ever seen, joining all of the water users, claimants to water in the West. What's that about? Well, tribes under their treaties have basically the senior rights to water. They were there first. In the West, water goes to those who were there first, and guess who was there first? But they just never knew that. These claims had never ever been brought under the treaties, which had been ignored. So we had a good dialogue, and it resulted in a conclusion that it's much better to try to settle these cases out of court than go through decades of litigation to establish basically what the U.S. Supreme Court had already said in 1908. The tribes have the senior water rights under the treaties. They'd just never been recognized because they'd been swept under the rug. So we have proceeded to move forward there. We got the government to set up a settlement process with the help of the people we met there at Keystone, the Western business leaders, the Western governors, and we have achieved 29 tribal water rights settlements, and we've got another 20 in negotiations. So that's the kind of things that have come out of the Keystone Policy Center dialogue. I was with Bob Craig in his last days, and we had a very good conversation about that. He's always interested in what I was doing, so I told him that I was headed to one of these meetings to talk about these tribal water rights settlements, and reminded him of the history of how we got to where we were, and it goes all the way back to the Keystone Policy Center days and that first Indian Business Roundtable that Bob ventured to host, and it's of course borne fruit. But that's the kind of thing that the Keystone Policy Center does. That's the spirit of Bob Craig, and I'm just very honored to receive this award here this evening. Thank you.